Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where we bring the mind, body, and gym together so you can improve your health, increase performance, and live your best life. For more information, visit thinkfitnesslife.com. Here are your hosts, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie.
I am here with a former captain and Big Ten champion himself at Ohio State University, Don Moxley. And Don became the university's first sports scientist. He went on to help the wrestling team win a national title and 3 Big Ten championships, creating 23 All-Americans. So he built his career out of increasing performance. And if I'm correct, now you're focused more on longevity and helping the general population with supplemental nutrition and teaching them about mitochondria and spermidine. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure is.
Excellent.
It's tough to separate human performance, whether it's, college guy on the mat or their grandparents. There's a lot of the same things, contribute.
Absolutely. Like you and I as coaches can look at the word performance and understand that being on a spectrum. But I think to the general person, someone who's 20 thinking like, I just want to accelerate my performance and be the best I can be, versus someone who's like 40, 50 is like, I just want to be able to get out of bed and not hurt and be able to participate in all the activities that life has to offer. But we still consider that a performance. Absolutely. So I want to dive right into, let's just recap what mitochondria is for people and why it's so important.
Sure. So mitochondria, okay, I'm going to make a statement here that I think is really important, is that mitochondria determines everything across the spectrum of performance, meaning that if you don't have mitochondria functioning appropriately in the beginning of your life as an athlete, you're not able to create the energy necessary to accomplish the goal that you set for yourself. Because, the athlete that can produce the most energy is the athlete that's going to have an advantage. And mitochondria is that part of the cell that's critical. And then if we move forward another 60, 70 years, all of a sudden mitochondria wind up being, you don't die when you run out of time. You die when you run out of energy. And energy is critical, and mitochondria is critical. So, that's why it's important. So what is it? Well, mitochondria are these little, what's called organelles in your cell, and it's where energy production takes place. Now, it's where the big part of energy production. There's a little bit of energy production that takes place in what's called the cytosol, the inside of the cell. But those precursors eventually work their way into the mitochondria. It goes through this process that's called the electron transport system. Mm-hmm. And it's that electron transport system where you get the bulk of the energy from the substrates that you've consumed. So these carbons work their way in, they wind up getting combined with oxygen in electron transport. They create ATP, which is energy. That is our human electricity. And the better job you do of that, the better you can do as a competitor, the better you can do as a thought leader, the better you can do in the longevity race that you're in. Matt, I like to think of life coming in 3/3. You spend the first third of your life learning. Mm-hmm. You spend the second third of your life earning, working for other people. Then you spend the third third of your life for yourself. It's your time. My wife and I, we just went through this. Our daughter moved out of our home a little over 2 years ago. We started our third third. We're done raising our kid. We still stay, but I don't have to keep a house there for her to go and then work in it. So, we sold that house, and right now I live in an RV now, and we travel all over the country.
That's great. That's awesome.
So we're doing our third thing, and I want this third to go as long as I can.
Absolutely.
This is a fun time, and so important for this is mitochondrial health, life, and performance. So that's what the mitochondria is. When you start thinking about, why do you exercise? Why do you supplement? Why do you do the things you do? Yeah. It's probably related to mitochondrial performance.
I love that philosophy too. It kind of reminds me of the quote, like, you need 3 things in life: 1 to keep you healthy, 1 to build your wealth, and 1 to keep you creative, right? The kind of the joy aspect of life and doing things for fun and for yourself. I think it's so important, so critical because, right, like, I mean, probably our parents and grandparents' generation was the type of like, I'm just going to work and grind. And after I retire, when I'm 60 and 70, I'll take care of myself. And my wife's a perfect example. The day her father retired, he had an aneurysm and died.
Right.
Like the same day he retired, But back to the mitochondria really quick. I just want to highlight for our audience, there's 36 trillion cells in our body, and each cell, if I'm correct, has anywhere from like 1,000 to 600,000 mitochondria. So
Yes.
just like astronomical, like you can't even really fathom how critical the impact becomes when you take care of or don't take care of mitochondria.
There you
And
go.
and I want to kind of dive into some of the common, like, I'm curious, what are the more degradation problems with mitochondria if not addressed?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that in that electron transport system, it's designed to, again, to pull in a couple carbons from a fat molecule. It trades the electrons and in what's called, there's both nicotinamide based and riboflavin based molecules, NADH, FADH.
And those
And
are
they
the precursors to ATP, right?
Well, yeah, they're part of that process that bolts the phosphates on to create the ATP.
Okay.
Now, and what's important about that is that if you are jamming too much energy in the front end of that process that's not getting used on the backside, it will decouple. It will stop, and it'll just start throwing off radicals, free radicals.
Free radicals. Okay.
Which is not a good thing. And so this is one of the challenges that we live in. We live in a time when we have so much food and so much energy available, and we live in a time when our movement is incredibly limited. We did not evolve this way. We evolved to move a lot more and eat a lot less.
Right.
So,
and be put under different stresses, right? Of like extreme cold, extreme heat, and all these to stimulate different, mechanisms in our own body.
So one of those big challenges is we're stuffing all this energy into that cell. That cell's trying to stuff it into the mitochondria because it just can't sit around in there. And you start to have these antioxidants, you start to have these reactive oxygen species develop, and which eventually leads to what we call cellular senescence. That if you throw enough of this in there, that cell kind of becomes a zombie cell. It's not dead, but it's also not alive. And so if you're stuffing too much energy in the front of this thing, you get a disconnect. If you're not pulling enough energy out of the back side of this, you get a disconnect in that electron transport chain. So there's this balance that is a big challenge for us. Number one, am I matching my energy to my output? And I think we have to be really careful. I don't think we've done a good job as health and fitness professionals. Dieting is not about calorie balance. Okay. You've got to take a little deeper step on this than calorie balance. And we can talk more about that as we go, but we do have to have energy going out. We do have to have control of the energy going. Now, the second part of this, mitochondria wear out. Okay. Mitochondria have their own genetic set. They do their own reproducing in the cell. The nucleus of the mitochondria has a DNA set that came from your mother. The nucleus, the nucleus of the cell has DNA from both your father and your mother. But that nuclear material in the mitochondria tells it when to reproduce, but it's not going to reproduce until we clear out the old stuff. This is where we come up with this term that we call autophagy.
Yes.
So autophagy is what's called self-eating. It's the Latin for self-eating. It's a self-cleaning process. Autophagy is typically triggered through fasting. So all of the major religious practices have
some type of fasting in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hooked right in. Yeah.
So there's a value there. And what we're starting to figure out is, man, we need to start to take a look at this because we need to stimulate fasting processes, because part of fasting is, and part of autophagy is actually called mitophagy, mitochondrial autophagy, where the cell goes in, gathers up those old organelles, it encapsulates them, and it digests them within the cell. Okay. So the byproducts of that can then go back into the cell to get reused and rebuilt. And autophagy also applies to the buildup of proteins that, Matt, when our cells are working correctly, we have nutrients on board. The nutrients, the cell says, hey, there's nutrients out here. Let's go ahead and make proteins. That's what cells do. They make protein. So it runs into the nucleus, it grabs some DNA, it pulls it back into what's called the ribosome. The ribosome takes that DNA and attaches amino acids together and becomes protein. But not all of those proteins are done correctly. There's mistakes in them from time to time. And if you have a protein in a cell that has a mistake in it, or it's not right, it'll just sit there unless you have autophagy. When you have autophagy will go in and clean that up. And when we start to look at longevity, or the things that are going to kill you, okay, things that are going to make you ill, they're related to inflammation.
Yeah.
So when I have that mitochondria that's throwing off radical oxygen species, that's causing inflammatory responses, though that inflammation eventually leads to cancers, immune response, all the things that kill us after 40 years old, for the most part, or the most things that kill us after 40 years old. So that autophagy process, when we look at it, what we've learned, and Matt, it's important. We just gave a Nobel Prize in 2016 to the Japanese researcher that fully described the autophagy process. Okay.
Really? Wow.
This is very cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, a researcher in Austria, Dr. Frank Medeo, started experimenting with this what's called a polyamine and senescent cells. And he saw that when he would put this polyamine into senescent cells, they would reverse, they would become healthy. And so we're trying to figure out what's going on. So that polyamine, that thing with it was called spermidine. And we'll talk more about this as we go, but we're working our way up out of the cell to the human. You know, you've got to have those mitochondria working. It's critical. That's where energy comes from. It's what keeps you alive. You've got to be able to not only feed the nutrients into that cell and into that mitochondria, but you've got to have a process where it's cleaning. That's the autophagy process.
Right.
So that's where fasting comes into play. Well, what we've learned is these nutrients are critical. There are nutrients that are critical to the autophagy process. And
spermidine being one of them?
We're finding out that spermidine is one of those. When we first started working with spermidine, we referred to it as a calorie restriction mimetic. It mimicked fasting. Well, we have a paper that's getting ready to come out early this year that basically establishes, in the absence of spermidine, you don't get autophagy.
Interesting.
So it's critical in that.
Like, it's not just the fasting period. If you're absent of spermidine and you have the fasting period, you're not going to stimulate autophagy anyway.
Doesn't happen.
And I love referencing autophagy as like the internal Roomba, like the self-cleaning oven, if turned on, right? And it's picking up all these free radicals and parts of cells and the glial cells and everything like that. All these pieces that would otherwise cause inflammation and then also leading to more damage can then cause mutations and precancer and cancer and things like that. So that's the benefit of getting autophagy in our system, but it doesn't happen if we are in a society where we eat. I mean, we're scheduled to eat every morning, lunch, and night, and meant to consume and everything. And so coming back to what we were just talking about, that's where the application of spermidine has an opportunity to make such a large impact, right? Because it can mimic this fasting period without any time away from food. Is it correct?
Yeah. So what we know is that autophagy is present in the cell at all times.
Okay.
The question is it upregulated or downregulated? It's not an on or off. It's upregulated or downregulated. So it's pretty clear. Walter Longo's work out at USC with the fasting mimicking diet is pretty clear. What he showed us, when most people think of dieting, they think of shrinking the number of calories they're consuming. What Dr. Longo showed us, it's not about shrinking this way. It's about shrinking the time we eat. that if we
Yes.
take the same amount of calories and we pack them into a shorter window, we get autophagy and we get health benefits, even if the calories are not ideal calories. So,
And a
I
big thing
think
of,
this is
Walter Longo's work is referencing all the clocks of the systematic chain of events that happens with digestion, and how it all links up to our suprachiasmatic nucleus and right.
well,
So
yeah, that's working at a level a little bit higher, but ultimately it comes down at a cellular level.
Mhm.
And at that cellular level, you know what? If you get your calories in a shorter amount of time, there's a health benefit there. If you clean up those calories that you're getting in, there's an additional health benefit there. But if you're eating calories daylight to dark, you're really not triggering this process of autophagy. You're not upregulating. And now again, listen, Matt, we didn't know what vitamin C was until we started packing sailors on the sailing ships back in the 1500s, in the
And they're getting
1400s,
scurvy.
and then we had scurvy, and we figured out, oh, there's this small micronutrient that we need. And you know what was interesting is it comes from different places. Is that not everybody on the ship got scurvy. The guys that ate the rats on the ship didn't get scurvy because rats make their own vitamin C. Those that didn't eat the rats had to take a citrus fruit in
Right.
order to get the vitamin C in. So we start to see these things come from different directions, and this is what's really important. But going back down to that mitochondrial level, and we were talking about electron transport, it doesn't like having too much energy stuffed in,
Okay.
and you got to keep it moving out the back. We can raise that analogy all the way up. Your body's not going to like having too much energy stuffed in. And you've got to keep the exercise in place to keep the energy moving out, so you keep that electron transport working. You know,
So we keep the intake window short so that we give our digestive system a rest, so to speak, and then keep our bodies active so that we're pulling that energy out from that chain.
Exactly.
Right.
exactly.
So, and without, and
That's why
the
you
reason being, sorry, connecting the dots for everybody here is reason being is because if we don't stimulate autophagy, we're being susceptible to damage to our mitochondria, which is going to affect our physical performance even as we age.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a fundamental challenge we all have. Right now, the average lifespan in the United States is 76 years old. Right now, the average health span is 62 years old. Okay. So that means that you're starting to interact with morbidity. This is where that term comes from. You're starting to interact with at 62 years old.
Mm.
Most people, so you've got those.
It's too young.
It's way too young, and it's way too expensive. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That you're going to spend 12 years in cancer treatment, in treatment for Alzheimer's, treatment for immune response. These are very expensive hospitalization procedures. All that work that you spent the first 62 years of your life, it's going to go to a hospital system somewhere.
Mm.
And it's not a good, listen, Matt, I don't know that you're old enough to have thought about this very much, but I've started to think about it. You know, how do you want to go? You know, what do you want this end of this third to be? I don't want mine to be in a hospital. You know, I hope I'm out walking the edge of the Grand Canyon and I slip and I take a good ride on the way down. Okay.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it.
Right.
But I don't want to spend the last 10 years of my life in a hospital.
Yeah.
Because that's just not a good way to go.
No, I'm, at 24, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. I've been dealing with this disease for 10 years. And I know the realities of, I'm on maintenance medication that may have to lead me to a biological eventually that still might allow me to have cancer. Right. So I fully agree. It's like you want to go out kind of on your terms in a blaze of glory. And I think it is important to kind of take death as an advisor so that you wake up to the realities of your choices, either, making that difference in that crossroad of or the fork of the road of are you going to try to get better each day with time, or are you going to be on a slow degradation with time?
Right.
Just kind of be holding on to that cliff, by your fingertips. And I think it's a quote comes to mind of Shawshank Redemption. You either get busy living or get busy dying. And
there you go.
Food is fuel, that food be thy medicine. And when we can learn about these specific compounds that have such a profound impact into our system, it becomes a part of that routine, that balancing act of fueling our system appropriately. So, are there natural, like where do we find spermidine? What is it naturally occurring in?
So spermidine, depending on how food is raised, can be dense in food. And have you read Blue Zones?
Yes. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
very familiar with blue zones.
We did a study where we went and looked at the diets of blue zoners. They're high in spermidine. Okay.
Interesting.
They're raised in gardens. They're not industrial produced food.
Okay.
So one of the so our spermidine, the spermidine that we use and that we sell, comes from wheat germ comes from Central Europe. Now, this is really important because we've not been able to find wheat germ in this country. Now, maybe it's here, we just haven't found it, but we've not found wheat germ in this country from our industrial food production methods that gives us the ability to extract. Now,
because we separate the wheat from the germ in this country, and then we pulverize it into a powder, and it's just like a simple starch. It's a simple sugar now.
Well, and I'm not sure that the spermidine's in it to begin with.
Right.
With the way we do it. But so one of the places you find spermidine most highly concentrated, there's a Japanese fermented soy product called natto. Very high in spermidine.
Interesting.
I don't know if you've ever eaten it. It's like eating snot.
I've never heard of it.
I can't. But, and there's some mushrooms, there's some things like that that'll have it. But the problem is, again, the challenge is not the food. The challenge is, how was the food raised? And was it tested? So when we produce our spermidine products, we measure at 3 different times in the process. We measure the wheat germ coming into the factory. We measure during the refining process, and we refine only using water. So we refine a lot of this out. We create what's called a Celvio complex. This Celvio, not only is there spermidine, but there's accompanying polyamines. One's called putrescine, the other one's called spermine. So those are in there as well, because this polyamine is going into the gut. We want it to hit the gut microbiota. Then it's going to move into the system. So the accompanying other polyamines are important. So this is when you get from a whole food extract. And this is one of the challenges. And if your listeners right now go to Amazon and they Google spermidine, they're going to see our product there, but they're going to see 30 other products that are very high in spermidine content, but probably a third the cost of ours. Well, those are synthetics. And there's been 0 human research published to date. There are 2 studies going on now, but there's been 0 human research to date showing that synthetic spermidine is either effective or safe. Now, they may change that. We have reams of studies showing that our product is safe and effective. So this is a big part of this. You got to be careful about how you consume, and it's that natural food product that's a usually better way to go than synthetic.
Absolutely on all levels, and it reminds me of, you're only as good as the quality of the soil that the produce was grown in. And not only is that stimulating the production of spermidine itself, but going to make a big difference to the effectiveness that it has on your system and the bioavailability that your body can read it.
Absolutely.
Right? If it's synthetic, usually the body has an issue with even understanding what it is to begin with.
Right. Well,
So,
what's funny is I grew up on a big beef cattle operation in Eastern Ohio. We had 1,000 head of cattle at one time. And I went to Ohio State. I had every intention of going home and feeding beef cattle, but I fell in love with human performance. I fell in love with exercise physiology. So I went a different direction, but we had 2
and you must have been strong and fast and powerful.
Well, I had 2 brothers that were bigger than I was. And we would clean the barn. We had 2-acre gardens. We had 1 garden. We had 2 gardens that were an acre each. The food that came out of those gardens was righteous. Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't know it back then. We just, we got to pick tomatoes or we got to pick beans.
But it was like the gold standard of food.
You go back and I think about what that stuff tastes. That was and if you think about that, it was a very blue zone-like environment. So we had a lot of recycling of resources going on, and we had very nutrient-dense food.
That's why
I can't buy that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The food industry has skewed the other direction, where We are fed by a food industry that pays no attention to health and healed by a healthcare industry that pays no attention to food. And, I love that I live in Utah because there's just tons of farmers markets and local produce. And, we actually ourselves at our house here built like a little community garden in our front yard. We have 2 large garden beds and peach trees. And you're so right. Like just the flavor that comes out of everything that is homegrown, it doesn't match anything that you can buy in the store that is probably just nutrient depleted, mineral and vitamin deficient anyway. But so you try to control what we can control and not worry about the rest. We used to pay for vitamin D tests. And then they said, you know what? People are so vitamin D deficient. We're not even going to cover this test anymore. We'll just assume that everybody is vitamin D deficient, right? And then everyone looks for that vitamin D supplement to throw into their routine. So, with spermidine, what is the appropriate dosage and when do you take it and how do you use it?
We're figuring that out right now.
So
to answer your question. So we Dr. Medeo and his team figured out that spermidine is important. Then we figured out that supplementing works. Okay. We saw the early studies, not just
that exogenous spermidine will affect internal autophagy.
Exactly. There's a great paper and it's called Spermidine in Health and Disease. It's a review paper that when they supplemented spermidine, we saw improvement in autophagy. We saw improvement in neural performance. We saw improvement in immune response. We saw improvement in cardiovascular performance. We also saw an improvement in epithelial stem cell production.
Oh, wow.
So across now,
and that's our gut wall, right? Epithelial cells.
Well, it's your skin and your gut wall. As you were mentioning it, I said, I'm going to have to send you some.
Yeah.
Because we've got several doctors that will use spermidine in IBS kind of situations.
Oh, wow. That'd be great.
But now we've got data showing improvement in liver function. We've got a paper that shows, I have a nephew that is a warrior and he's in a group that they get concussed regularly.
Oh, wow.
And he's been using spermidine to help deal with his cognitive issues. And now he and some of his group are using it. And he calls me one day, I was asking about it. Well, the European science team sends me a paper on spermidine improving the performance of closed traumatic brain injury, lowering inflammation. Remember, anytime you're lowering inflammation, anytime that you're raising autophagy, you're lowering inflammation. So those two go hand in hand. So, and Matt, one of my challenges is trying to keep this product from sounding like snake oil.
Right. Because there's so many people out there. And that's not your problem. That's just there's so many loud voices out there.
Well, I'm fine with that. But the thing comes to play is that if you don't have this fundamental gear down deep in your cells, you're going to have dysfunction that leads to dis-ease. And so, listen, I'm lucky enough to work for a pretty cool company that's got really good science that we now start these conversations with. Now, so let me go back. We started selling a 1 milligram a day product because I wanted to address your dosage question.
Yeah.
We started selling a 1 milligram product because that's what the European Union said we could sell. Pretty quickly, we figured out that 1 milligram is not enough for most people. So we now have a 2 milligram and a 6 milligram a day product that what we see our physicians using, they're using the 6 milligram anytime they have a therapeutic challenge. Fatty liver disease. There are very few things that work on fatty liver disease. As you raise the spermidine levels and improve liver autophagy, you start to metabolize liver fat, which is a good thing. So, and if I've got someone that I'm going after a therapeutic, whether, across the board, then I'm probably going to go with a higher dose. Once I'm dropped back, what we know is that if spermidine isn't in your diet now from your food sources, it's not coming in. You have to supplement.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the doctors we work with have settled out. They're using 2 milligrams a day, our 2 milligram extra plus product. They seem to be pretty happy with that. And that seems to be where the market's going.
Interesting. Now, what are the markers for measuring autophagy?
Great. That's the $64,000 question. So typically the markers for measuring autophagy are done in research labs. that they have to use radioisotopes and they have to label the byproducts of autophagy, and they count them with microscopes and radioisotopes.
So they're kind of looking in the past to see if autophagy had happened.
See if it's happening in other parts there.
Right.
But we are excited about a paper that's coming out this year out of Oxford that we think we may have some protein markers. If you're interested, you sign up for our newsletter at our website. When this stuff actually comes out, when that paper hits, we'll be talking about it.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I'm curious if it will evolve, in 10 years from now, there could be someone who could do like a home test and see, their autophagy levels, if their body's doing it or not.
I was down at a conference this weekend down in Miami, and I came across a group that's measuring mitochondrial function. Mm-hmm. First time I've seen this. Yeah. So this stuff is emerging right now. For sure. But the thing that most of our clients talk about when they start using spermidine, 3 to 5 weeks afterwards, they notice their fingernails start growing like crazy. So remember, we talked about those epithelial stem cells, which are your skin, become your fingernails, eventually become your hair. All of those things improve. So this is how most people recognize that the spermidine is working for them. Now, we also see people that are seeing some key performance indicators in HRV or in sleep quality, but we don't have papers on that. That's just testimonials that we're getting from our client user
clinical testing.
These are not clinical. This is not clinical testing. This is strictly user group testimonials.
Gotcha.
And you got to take that for exactly what it is.
Right.
But what pretty much everyone I've worked with, if they don't see this fingernail, hair, skin, and nails thing start in 3 to 5 weeks, they raise their dose and it immediately kicks in.
Interesting. That is fascinating.
We just launched a product with a partner of ours, Young Goose, which is a skincare cream, and they're putting spermidine in a serum and a skin cream. Again, when you look at exogenous application of spermidine and in the cellular matrix in the healing process, spermidine's critical. You've got to have autophagy. So if you cut your hand and you have a scar developing, for that scar to heal, there needs to be autophagy in that place. So this is part of the process of the skin healing process. So we just launched a partnership with that group, and we're really excited about what's going on there.
So there's going to be a topical application of spermidine.
No, there is. It's not going to be. There is. Yeah.
And it just accelerates the healing process.
We're waiting to hear. There's no clinical work being done there.
Okay.
But again, and when you start doing skin creams and things like that, it changes. It's not like we're doing internal measurements. There's a lot going on. But what I'm saying is that there's enough efficacy here that there are several companies that are looking at trying to bring this polyamine, this particular molecule, and making it more available.
Yeah.
And again, so Young Goose put it in the skin cream and serum.
And I think the barrier of entry, to your point, the difficulty is just getting people to. And I think our industry, there's a lot of great people in our industry who do a good job of trying to stimulate people to educate themselves and dive deep and learn about what's working or what's effective, what's not effective, and what's like a proper solution for their given scenario. And then the more that it's widely accepted, it just kind of takes on. I remember reading a study back in college, and it was like, if somebody does good work, someone tells 2 to 3 people about it. If someone does bad work, it takes, they tell 10, 15 people. So it just takes longer when something's
Zig Ziglar stuff. That's exactly right. And there's a lot of
there. And when something's effective and good, it just takes longer, right? I mean, because it's just affecting people at a slower rate, but it's doing its job and just growing until it gets that tipping point. But it's definitely something that I want to be trying for at least 90 days, and probably going to add it to my routine. I already take 4 mesalamine every morning with my vitamin K, vitamin D, and colloquial or something like that actually does support mitochondrial repair. But I think it's
Are you using nicotinamide, either NAD precursors, NMN?
I tried one a long time ago, but nothing currently. No. Because are you talking about something that needs to be coupled with the spermidine to make it effective?
No, well, ironically, I'm going to reach over my shoulder here real quick. This is a product that we are bringing to market this year. It's called NAD Life, and it is actually, your group is the first group to have seen this, so we haven't released this in this country yet. But it's a NMN and spermidine combination in a single product. So is it
looks like you
working?
mix it with water and drink it in the morning or something?
Mix it with water and drink it in the morning, evening, either time. But I do think supplement, if someone's struggling with energy, if someone just doesn't have energy and they're tired of being on the caffeine, nicotine, treadmill, I think nicotinamide, NMN, NR, any of those precursors. I'm not a fan of NAD IVs. There's issues with that. But I think when you're supplementing the precursors, I've seen this work for a lot of people very well. So we talked about electron transport, that the molecule that runs most of electron transport is what's called NADH. The N is nicotinamide, and it will exhaust, and you have to replace it dietarily. So again, when you're dealing with energy issues, it's not a bad idea. And again, if you sign up for our newsletter, I think by the second half of the year, we'll have our NAD Life out ready to go.
And where can people go to find you and your products?
So you'll find products about Spermidine Life, Spermidine Life, SPERMIDINELIFE, spermidinelife.us. Okay. If you go to .com, that's our European channel. .us is our American channel. So that's where, so you can learn, that's where we send all our consumers to. It's where you get started.
Excellent. And just last couple of questions I like to ask people. Don, do you have a favorite lift or exercise?
What's my favorite lift? Now I'll tell you here's the lift that I think everyone needs to do. And here's why. So we talked about third. Okay. And that third, it's about independence and maintaining your independence. And the day that you can no longer sit down, defecate, clean yourself, and stand up and walk away is the day you lose your independence.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yeah. Everyone should squat.
Love it. Yes.
Okay? Everyone should squat just for that reason. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of my favorites. I love banging around the weight room. I'll tell you, we live in an RV now. So, that's my sauna over my right shoulder and my red light system for my left shoulder. So I have a lot of kettlebells. I'll tell you, I kind of like maces, and I've got a ballistic block that I'll use maces with. So I don't have the big weight room like I used to have in my own house.
Right. You got to get a little more creative.
A little more creative, but my favorite form of exercise is riding a bike. Now listen, I've had 8 knee surgeries. Okay. So I was forced to it, but I just love riding my bike.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got a good plethora of everything. And I love that you have the sauna there, because I feel like as we get older, we have to make sure we're adding specific recovery modalities into the routine as well, right? Sauna, ice bath, good quality night's sleep, and then supplement appropriately. So that's great. And then last thing I like to always ask people is just maybe it's something that you're inspired, that you got inspired from this conversation, or just comes to mind in general. Do you have a favorite quote?
What I gave, what I saved is lost forever. That's a Nietzsche quote that used to be on the board above the door in our wrestling room. That's one of my favorites.
Can you say it one more time?
What I had, I gave, and what I saved is lost forever.
I love it.
So I'm typically a pretty ferocious reader, but just pulling it off the top of my head, that's the one I go to.
And I don't think you gave it all. I think you're still giving. You're still in the process of giving it all.
It's a cycle. It's all a cycle. You got to pull it out and push it in. Matt, I do a talk, and I talk about the 4 rocks of longevity. And have you read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Stephen Covey.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he talks about having a jar and putting rocks in it. Is it full? And then they put gravel in, and they put sand in. And so much of the exercise in the biohacking industry gets focused on sand and gravel. And if you fill your jar with sand and gravel, you won't get the big rocks in. So What are the 4 big rocks? What are the things you have to have? You have to move. You hack movement with exercise. You need nutrient-dense food.
Yes.
If you can't get it from your food, then you hack it with supplements.
You need
sleep. Sleep
recovery,
is as important
yeah.
as the other 2. You can't hack sleep, but you can hack the sleep environment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is really important. My 4th rock is light. Light on the skin. Okay.
Interesting.
At the right time of day. Again, that's why I have red light in my unit. That's why we do what we do. But Matt, this all goes into the jar of purpose. Okay. You have to have a reason, because our society is constantly causing us to move less, eat poorer, sleep less, get less light. The way we live, and you have to have a reason to drive that. You have to have a purpose. Mine, I want to be that crazy 90-year-old wrestler that still goes in and teaches. I want to see my daughters. I want to see my grandkids and my great-grand. I want to coach them. Okay. Yeah. That's my purpose. That's why I want to live long and not spend the end of my life in a hospital.
Right. You can have all the health in the world, but if you have no reason to stay around, exactly. Like, not only do you not have the drive, but there's many ways that can lead to a bad situation. But yeah, I love that. You got to find your why. You got to find your purpose and establish your purpose and give yourself to the world. And I think that is people's purpose, honestly, when they find that they want to get up and, you're clearly so driven. And I loved hearing about everything with autophagy and mitochondria and everything you guys are doing with spermidine. And yeah, Don, it was a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to include for our listeners? Anything else that we didn't touch on, or you want to highlight?
Well, let's give your listeners a discount code. So let's call it TFL 15.
That's great.
They can get a 15% discount on our website at spermidinelife.us.
And I'll include everything in the show notes for people too. Yeah.
And Matt, I think you and I need to plan on doing a podcast, if not before that, 30 years from now, and see how our third's going.
I love it. Yeah, we'll be checking in, make sure everyone's thriving, right?
Listen, and if you're not, let's figure out what we have to change. I have a personal mission, helping individuals understand the changes necessary to alleviate suffering and contribute to the betterment of well people. That's what drives me. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to when we do this in 30 years. Maybe we do it in person out in Salt Lake.
Yeah, that'd be great. You can drive out here and we'll camp around here.
We were up in Park City and we spent some time in that area. We love that area, so it's going to be easy to get me back.
It's beautiful, yeah. And Huntsville's another good one to go to. But yeah, I love your mission. I love your purpose. I feel the same way, that I'm here as a service provider to try to help people live their best life. And I know a little about a lot. And the best thing I can do for people is just stimulate them to move and modify their life with exercise programs, nutrition protocols, and habit coaching to try to get them to, put those deposits into the right bank accounts that pay the dividends for the future ahead so they can live their best life. So I'm glad you're living it, because honestly, I have dreams of just selling things and getting an RV. I've been looking at, above truck camper beds and, just adventuring, and, I have a foldable kayak. So you're living the dream. I hope to be doing what you're doing in the future.
Listen, like I said, can't wait to cross paths with you out on the road.
Excellent. Don, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. And thanks for coming on here and talking about spermidine for everybody here.
If you're ready to make steps towards improving your health or increasing your performance, book a free 30-minute call today by visiting thinkfitnesslife.com.